I'm Harrison Graham. Welcome to Chicago Bears. And now ESPN's Bill Barnwell explores Myles Garrett's trade value. So I thought that would be something we could revisit and discuss here in a second. He also did not dismiss the Bears as a potential trade. And then is another trade target, a big name potentially emerging not only for the Bears but for other teams. We'll dive into that as well here on today's show. Let's start with Myles Garrett, though, as Barnwell, who did a deep dive, kind of explored some other trades of what a player of Garrett's stature could look like if he were to get moved. He is not convinced it would be 2 first-round picks, depending on who the team that is trading for him. Again, he used prior examples and players of his age and all that stuff to kind of revisit these type of deals. And more often than not, it is not as much as we end up thinking it is, although with this being a weaker draft, maybe that would increase the value. He also did not rule out Chicago in a potential trade. He eliminated, I think, 11 teams and kind of made the case for every other team. So we'll have a little nugget on that as well. Here's what he had to say when it comes to the value. He said, "It seems like a first-round pick would be the bare minimum for Garrett. 2 first-rounders might be a big ask for a player approaching 30, even one as talented as Garrett, but it all depends on who is sending those picks and where they land. If a team's offering a top 10 pick in the 2025 draft, Bears pick 10th, it might not need to offer much else. If it's the Eagles sending 32, there would need to be something more substantial as a second asset going Cleveland's way." The point he's making there, and this goes without saying, but I will say it, not all first-round picks are created equal. If the Bills are trying to trade Myles Garrett, you're probably going to have to trade at least 2 first-round picks because they're picking 30th. The Bears are picking 10th. Like, 30 to 10, that is a massive gap in value, and all these teams have these point charts in terms of how much a player is worth, how much a pick is worth, all that stuff. To go from 30 to 10 is typically substantial. Now, maybe it's a little lower than normal in this draft because it's not as top-heavy, but that is worth saying, and that is what Bill Barnwell is saying there. Obviously, the Bears have good draft capital. They have 3 picks in the top 41 this year. They have 72 as well. Future firsts, all that stuff also. So they've got decent ammunition if they wanted to get in on the Myles Garrett sweepstakes or a Micah Parsons, a Max Crosby, whoever else, a player we're going to talk about here in a minute as well. I got to say, man, when Barnwell says if a player or if a team that's picking in the top 10 may not have to offer a ton else, like that's got me pretty interested. Now, he could be off. Every offseason is different. Draft picks this year may not be worth as much as a typical year, so maybe you'd still have to trade another strong asset there. But I'd probably pull the trigger if you could trade 10 and just one more day 2 pick to get Myles Garrett. I get he's 29, but I still think you'd have a lot of cap space, especially with a new contract for Garrett to lower his cap number this year to go address the offensive line in free agency. And depending on which picks you trade, you should still have enough picks to at least get 1 starter in the draft on the offensive line. So if you add 2 in free agency, bam, there's 3 new starters next to Darnell Wright and, in theory, Braxton Jones. Because let's remember something, and I'm not downplaying the value of the number 10 pick. It's still valuable. This is not a loaded draft in round 1. What have we talked about for weeks now? Day 2 is the sweet spot. Scouts think that the 20th pick, it may not be much different than the 55th pick in terms of the caliber of player that you're going to get. Like 20 through 75 is probably pretty similar. Now, 10 is right on the border of still getting like an elite guy. So, it really just depends on how Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson view the top of this board this year and who could be available there. But you're probably not getting a player of Myles Garrett's caliber. Now, that's true in most drafts because this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer, but your percentages are probably even lower this year. Now, here's what Barnwell had to say when it came to the Bears potentially trading for Myles Garrett. He said with $65 million in cap space, that's roughly, obviously, they could afford to add Garrett and still have the ability to address their offensive line in free agency. With an extra second-round pick still coming from the 2023 trade with the Panthers, they have extra capital if they did decide to make an offer for Garrett. If they believe Johnson can help bring along cost-controlled talent on offense, focusing their spending on the defense would make sense. This is what I've been saying all along, whether it's for Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, whoever. If you could pull off a trade that doesn't completely diminish your draft capital, like if it's 2 1s and 2 2s or something, like I'm out. But if it's a 1 and a second pick or a 1, a day 2 pick and like a future day 3 pick or something, that's not crazy to me. And you still are going to have a lot of cap space because you'll probably give Garrett a new deal. He's got 2 years left, so you could morph that into a longer deal, push money down the road. Still have plenty of cap space this year to add multiple starters. You could still pay a Trey Smith if he hit the open market. And then, depending on the draft picks that you trade, you could still probably find at least one starter on the offensive line in the draft. Now, admittedly, you'd have less darts to throw in the draft, but at least you'd know what you're getting in Myles Garrett, which is probably, actually not even probably, I'd say pretty easily the best player on your team if you added Myles Garrett. He would instantly be the best player on this roster, and to me, that's pretty noteworthy. So here's my updated trade idea. 10 and 41 for Garrett. Like, in a draft that's not loaded at the top this year, you're telling me you would not entertain that trade. You'd still have 39 where you could select a player. You could potentially trade down. You'd still have 72. You'd still have your first next year. Like, this is not that bad. It really, really isn't. So what say you? Would you do this trade? Type Y for yes. Type N for no. I probably would. I get people are saying, O-line, O-line, O-line. I am too. I don't think this would cripple your ability to address the offensive line. So Y for yes, N for no. Would you do this trade when it came to Myles Garrett? Okay, plenty more to discuss here on today's show, but we are sponsored by ZBiotics. Listen, folks, you want to go on a nice night out this Valentine's and, have a couple of drinks because, listen, I don't drink nearly as much as I used to, but I like to splurge now and then. Wife and I going out Saturday night, have a couple of cocktails. And unfortunately, when I have too many, I just don't bounce back the way I used to. But that's all changed when I found ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Pre-Alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to drink this probiotic before drinking alcohol. Drink responsibly and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. We all have busy lives these days, so don't waste any more days after a night of drinking. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol is the answer we've all been looking for. So here's what you need to do. Go to zbiotics.com/chatsports or scan the code on screen, the QR code, to redirect you to that website and use code chatsports to get 15% off at checkout. That's one word, chatsports, for 15% off. You can also sign up for a subscription with our code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guaranteed. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. To revisit that trade, 10 and 41. I'm doing that, and I'm giving him a new contract. Maybe that's too aggressive. Maybe that's silly of me. Myles Garrett, to me, does not look like a player that's slowing down. I think you're getting at least 3 more elite years out of him and probably 2 or 3 more good years on top of that. This is not a player that I think hits 31, 32 and just starts to fall off a cliff. I mean, this guy takes care of his body. He looks like he's someone into his mid-30s that could play at a very, very high level. He's had 60 sacks the last 4 years. He won DPOY in 2023. He's been a finalist several times. This guy would transform your defense. He really, really would. And I get it. I've said this as well. Like, you got to put more investment into the offense, especially the offensive line. But again, it's not like you can't do that. And if you want to say, well, Harrison, you're already paying Montez Sweat. Well, after next year, you could get out of that deal if you wanted to. Jermaine Edmonds can come off your books after next year. It's not like your books would be so heavily defense for years to come. You're talking maybe 1-2 years, and then you start investing even more into the offense, which you'd still be able to, by the way. You already have DJ Moore under contract. If you can build the offensive line still while pulling off a trade like this, I would very, very much be intrigued to do it. Because your D-line, by the way, if you pull this off, it goes from average at best to elite pretty instantly. Because think of the domino effect, right? Myles Garrett becomes your top guy. We know he can dominate in that role. Montez Sweat is a number 2 edge. Really, really good player. Javon Dexter getting a lot of one-on-ones on the interior. He's already taken steps early on in his career. Andrew Billings, just stuff the run, man. That's all you got to do. That's starting 4. Walker is your 5th guy. Booker is a developmental guy. Maybe you draft a guy on day 3 to add to that rotation. You're pretty much set. Like, you don't have to add much more to that defensive line if you pull this off. So I would do it, especially if it's less than 2 ones. I get the pushback, but I don't think it cripples your ability to build the offensive line. I really, really don't, because if you give him a new deal, his cap hit this year is probably less than $20 million. And so let's say you add a $15 million cap hit. You still have $50 million to work with in cap space. You can easily add multiple offensive line starters with that money. Easily. So that's my stance. I like the idea. I don't know what the Browns are going to ask, but are they going to take 2 first-rounders from a team like Buffalo, or would they rather have 10 and 41? 10 and 41 is probably more appealing than 30 and wherever Buffalo is going to be picking next year. So we'll see how it all plays out. All right, we are knocking on the doorstep of 117,000 subscribers. If you love the Bears, if you want more news, rumors, even if you disagree with me, that's the beauty of this channel. The live interaction with all of you makes it all fun. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Let's get to 117,000 subs. That way we can continue to plug out daily content. Okay, how about Quinnen Williams? I know people are going to roll their eyes at this. I think this could be an interesting name to monitor. Now, would I bet on him becoming available? Probably not, but he expressed some frustration on Twitter a few days ago when it was initially reported that the Jets were going to cut Aaron Rodgers. He tweeted this out: another rebuild year for me, I guess, with eye emoji or eye roll emoji. Obviously, Quinnen has been a part of a lot of bad teams in New York, and he's probably thinking, well, if we get rid of Rodgers, that means at least for one more year we're not going to be winning much. Well, now Rodgers is getting cut. Like, the Jets themselves announced it today, so that is done and over with. Now, Williams has since deleted that tweet. I think he actually deactivated his Twitter because Jets fans went after him in classic social media fashion. But Quinnen Williams is an unbelievable talent. Could he want out? I don't know. I know as a competitive person myself, if I'd be losing constantly, I mean, hell, just as a Bears fan and covering this team, like, it's driving me crazy that this team hasn't been able to win. After a while, you just get sick of it. You want something new. You want to go win. And obviously the Bears haven't won a ton recently, so I don't know how he'd feel about coming here. But, you put him on the inside with a Dexter with Sweat on the outside. That's a pretty fun piece to have as well. He's one of the best interior players in the NFL. Now, the financials of this, if he were to get traded, the Jets would save just under $7 million. And for the team he's going to, the cap hit this year, less than $17 million. So from like a financial perspective, this one actually is probably even more team-friendly than a potential Garrett trade, because you're not going to have to give him a new deal of $35 million per year or whatever it's going to take. With Garrett, you could probably wait at least a year to do an extension because he's got 3 years left. It's pretty reasonable for both sides in terms of the financials. So, again, I think just another name to monitor. And I think the point of all of this, the more players that potentially become available, like, the better the price could be, because if 4 or 5 of these big-time players become available, they're not all going to cost a crazy amount to get, right? Like, there's just not enough picks to go around, not enough teams. So it's all very interesting to see how it plays out. He had a little bit of a down year this year, but remember the defense kind of fell apart when they fired Saleh. He was still pretty productive. The last 2 years he was very good. The sacks were a little down in 23 as well, but his pass rush win rate and advanced stats, all that stuff was off the chart. So, again, one of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL, plays the run well also. I think a guy like Dexter could benefit greatly from him, playing next to him and playing alongside him. So, who knows? This one feels less likely. I would imagine Aaron Glenn gets in there and gets on the same page with him, but just another name to potentially keep an eye on as the offseason progresses. What do you guys think is the bigger need on the defensive line? Do you think it's edge or defensive tackle? You could really make both arguments. I like the starting pair of Billings and Dexter better, but there's not good depth there. Whereas Sweat, at least with edge, you have Sweat, you have Walker, you have Booker, who could be something. They could re-sign Jacob Martin. So really kind of depends how you look at it. Edge, defensive tackle, I'd say both. Probably need at least one piece at both. Again, unless you get a Myles Garrett, then defensive tackle becomes less of a priority because the edge is so dominant. Let me know what you guys think. And then stay tuned. Ian Cunningham going to interview for that Jags GM job tomorrow. Just wanted to remind everybody of that. Jags have been ripping GM interviews all week. If Cunningham were to get that job, the Bears, of course, will get 2 third-round compensatory draft picks, one this year, one next year. So something to monitor as the Jags go through that process. The latest report suggests they want someone in place by next week, because the week after that the combine gets going. So we should know in the next, I don't know, 5 days if Cunningham's getting that job. So if he does, we'll have that covered, which is one of many reasons to subscribe to the channel, because when news drops, we hit you guys with the video. When big rumors and trade buzz is out there, we give our takes on that as well. Take your questions during our live shows. Plenty of reasons to subscribe, so hit that big sub button.